Oh, it looks like I took a wrong turn, ended up in the Let's Talk Broncos stream here. This is interesting. Zach Seegers, how are you?
I'm doing great. Excited to be talking about a Broncos draft. It's hope season. Off season's always hope season, but you get a bunch of new players added to the team. We can all look at it, glass half empty, glass half full, however you want to be. And, excited to be back in the saddle with you, Bree.
It's Schrodinger's draft. You have no idea how this
Well
is going
put.
to do. Bad? Was it good? It's neither. Right now, we're sitting pretty here at the end of a very fast moving weekend for Denver Broncos sports. Listen, the draft was fun. Had a ton of fun hanging out with everybody for the draft watch party down at the Rock Restaurant Bar and Grill. Kudos to everyone who was involved. Frankie Abbott and Liam, who were able to make it out to join us from out of state, including some fans of the show and friends of ours on Twitter. I know Dak was out there.
Shout out Dak.
Not trying. Shout out to Dak. Thank you for making the trip. And I've convinced myself that it was specifically just for us. So I'm going to hold that very high and in regard to your viewership here on LTB. And then thanks to everybody else who had a hand in getting this done, especially Mario Vitanzi. Could not have done it literally without him. And then everybody else who was in attendance. Yeah, just absolutely rocked it. Was able to be the MC of the night. And honestly, that is the job he was born for. So super happy that happened. David Talks Broncos and the NFL draft finally made alive. Well, welcome, David. Good to see you.
Glad to have you, David.
Always glad. I'm going to be looking at the chat quite frequently as I get I feel like I haven't done this in a while. So I want to get this all back under my belt. So I am getting my sea legs back. It's almost overwhelming that there's so many people in here with us to start the show. Hello, Paul. It's good to see you. I don't know who Trig is. I've never seen this name before, but he said Greenlaw is injured and the world is over. We're going to get into that here in a second. I think that's definitely important news that we have to cover. But I think what's most important is to cover the fact that the Let's Talk Broncos collaborators, just in general, we're a very close-knit type of group. As you can see, we like to hang out with each other and all those things. But we also like to have some conversations that end up leaving us a little bit riled up. And I wanted to start this evening by a conversation that's presently going on in our group chat about the idea that 100 men, and this is 100 men, maybe of your choosing, whatever. The idea
average
is average men could not take on a singular gorilla and snuff the life out of them. And so there's a back and forth that I quite possibly don't understand, where maybe, Zach, you can shed some light on this. I feel like they're underestimating the sheer numbers game when it comes to taking down an animal of any size, right? Like ancestors in the theory of evolution were, cohabitating at the time of mammoth, no pun intended, species. So, and thank goodness Patrick Coyote is here, because this is a conversation we need to have having this conversation. Frankie is also here, so this is perfect. All right, guys, so drop it in the chat while you're here, and if you're not over on YouTube, you're making a mistake. Go on over YouTube, search Let's Talk Broncos, jump on the live stream, have this conversation along with us, and yeah, eventually we will get to the Broncos talk, but I don't have time for that right now. I need this is why Zach and Bree stopped responding in the chat. Yes, we're busy, but we've brought the conversation over here. I feel like it's extremely important. So let's get it going.
Respond. That's the real. Yes, they can't. What can be one-sided. We can throw the comments up on the screen if we want, but we can also silence them and make it entirely one-sided, which I enjoy.
We have full control over this.
You got to be team human on this one. I'm not saying you line the people up in a single file line and let them go one-on-one with the gorilla, 100 times. That's not going to go well. But 100 people fighting for their lives, swarming one animal. I don't know if you guys are big history buffs at all, but that's kind of how humanity started. That's kind of how civilization started. You had a lot of animals out there. We were kind of one of it. We got in little groups of 5 or 10 people. people, another fun thing, if you ever go to a old historic site, you might notice the doors are a lot smaller, right? It's because we've grown a lot bigger as we've gotten like proper nutrition and we're healthier creatures, just in general. So we're talking about like 10 5'5" dudes with an IQ of 50 who are malnourished and have sticks, and they would take down woolly mammoths to the point of extinction. So that's what they were doing. Okay. 100 people today that are like 6 foot, got 60 pounds on those dudes, got about 30, 40 IQ points. Cleaning up. We're losing some along the way. We're losing
That's an important point. Yeah.
Some people aren't moving the same afterward. There's going to be a pre-gorilla and a post-gorilla for a lot of people in that group of 100. But there are people standing when the gorilla stops breathing.
I think it's really important to note you will not have all of your limbs. You may not have your neighbor coming back with you. The buddy system is flawed in this instance. They're not coming back whole. Also, I imagine the PTSD after the gorilla, post gorilla times is just, it's hard to come by, right? And so thank you.
Never
Thank
watch George of the Jungle again.
Could you imagine how debilitating Curious George books would be as you walk around the corner of your local Barnes and Noble and you're just absolutely, taken out by that. Okay. All right. Pat said they just accepted their fate. I don't know who that is, but right now it feels like it's the Let's Talk Broncos podcast. Thanks for joining us. Needed to get that off our chest because we were absolutely just walloped by nonsense before we got onto the stream tonight.
Yes, well, it's going to be a crazy one. We've already got Clay Webb comments coming in. Excited for that conversation, Bree. I don't know if you're ready for that one, but
I'm not. I don't even know what to anticipate. Listen, a lot has happened.
Oh no! If you don't know what to anticipate, I've got a fun surprise for you later in the show, Bree.
Okay, fantastic. Let's get it rolling. Now that we're all smiling, let's take it down a notch. I'm a little worried about what the news that we heard today. Right, Dre Greenlaw is suffering a bit of a quad injury. Zach is smiling through the pain right now as we can. A fun little surprise later. I'm terrified. This is why I can't do this show with the comments just streaming across the screen. I'm like, I'm scared. I'm distracted. But okay, our worst fears have happened. Zach, we talked about it when the acquisition happened of Dre Greenlaw from the Niners was somewhat of an injury history and a concern there. Initial reports were a little bit, I think, overwhelming with the idea that this would impact his season, and it's only April. Now we're on to the conversation that it looks like Denver's own Benjamin Albright is saying that it is a minor strain and not a quad tear, which is good news. It won't necessarily impact his season. It's a close call. And I think I'm feeling a little bit of a shockwave from it, Zach. Get us started with kind of how you took the news and where you're at with how that impacts our offseason here heading into 2025.
Yeah, I think the great thing is Dre Greenlaw will probably be unaffected by this as far as, the 2025 season is concerned. But I do think this should affect the Denver Broncos offseason. The linebacker's an important position, I think, or a position they were weaker at last year, one of the weakest spots on the team. And you replace Cody Barton with Dre Greenlaw, but you do not have a lot of great options outside that lead dog. And if Dre Greenlaw goes down, I think there's a reason why all of Broncos country collectively had like a panic moment, because it's like, oh my God, if he's down, we're really screwed at inside linebacker. And there's a good chance he goes down. Part of the reason you got Dre Greenlaw at the price you got him is because there's some concerns that he might have reoccurring injuries. He might miss time, a fair amount of time over these next 2-3 years, however long he's on that deal. So you should probably have a good insurance plan. And I think in a way, maybe this calf strain was a blessing in disguise, because maybe it gave everyone in Dove Valley a second of like, oh my God. And now they can, reflect on that and hopefully add another veteran body to the room. There aren't great options out there, but I do think there's options where you feel you're further away from disaster than the Broncos currently are.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It will be another time will tell endeavor here for the Broncos. Hopefully, there's enough depth in what they presently have if that were to carry over to the season. Our resident health expert here, Mario Vitanzi, could jump in at any time and kind of let us understand how soft tissue injuries seem to affect players going forward, or perhaps Mario is already on the case. I don't know that for sure. I'm making up rumors here live on Let's Talk Broncos. The chat it's killing me, and I feel good
I
about
love
it.
it because
So
they're not specifically saying what it is. So they're just getting to build your dread more and more. That's going to be a fun reveal. Once we get through the 7th round pick, because UDFAs, guys, we don't talk about UDFAs until after the 7th round. So you gotta stick around for the Clay Webb story.
yeah, you got to give it time to kind of work itself through my brain. And then while I'm listening to you talk, I can Google it. And to my absolute horror,
Have you read it? Do you need a
yeah,
band?
I did. Yeah, I did. I already read it and I scrolled I feel like there's no straight face that can be kept during tonight's show. And it's going to seem like there's this inside joke that nobody knows about. But here we are.
Everyone's having their Walter White moment watching Hank get axed. No, no. Yeah, wow. Totally off the rails. I love it.
No,
Couldn't have it
it's
any other way.
early. If Joey was here, I'm not quite sure what he would say, but he would rescue me right now. It's just unfortunate. All right, let's get started. We got to start with the number one pick. I want to first and foremost. I tweeted out, I posted over on X, whatever we're calling it these days, the idea that I feel like this draft for the Denver Broncos was. It was disciplined. And it was in a way where I was excited to see just how far they were willing to go to stay to whatever strategy they had agreed upon at the start of this draft, which was, trading back when they saw fit. The Broncos are in a great position where they're no longer they can have a sense of urgency without clamoring for this splashy pick in the first round. There was the thought of them trading back. There was a thought of them going, most needed position at number 20. There was the thought of them chasing and moving up in the draft. And it just felt, for me, and I'm speaking obviously just for myself and not the LTB contingent, but I felt it was definitely disciplined. Victory Lap says, or was it a little bit disappointing? I wasn't disappointed. I was actually really enamored by the movement that was happening. Consistently trading back tells me that they had a plan and they wanted to stick with it and they wanted to see who fell to them. And they had their tier graded out systems that made sense for whatever the Paytons in the organization had agreed upon, right? So that number one pick being Zadeh Barron is shocking. And in the moment, I was like, there's no way. There is absolutely no way. But I had joked about it a little bit with Patrick Chiodo. And I was like, what if they're in such a position, you need offensive weaponry, you need that spark for Bo. But what if they go best player available on the defense, just like they did Patrick Surtain? How could that possibly be the wrong answer when bolstering your defense is ensuring that your offense has an extra step ahead? They have an advantage. So I just want to give my initial thoughts on kind of where I'm sitting with this draft in particular. I'm very happy with what they were able to do. And honestly, had they continued to trade out there towards the end, there was still a ton of talent that they could have picked up in those last couple of picks. So Zach, do you want to give me your kind of overall idea of how you felt just watching that play out? And then we can roll into pick number one.
Yeah, I think I was higher on it than consensus just because I liked some of the players better than I think they were ranked on, consensus boards or, fan mock drafts. You'll see the same names pop up 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round over and over again. And I think, that can always be a trap for fans to maybe get their expectations set a little too high. We do always see players fall, but it's rarely ever the players that are falling in those mock draft sims. Like the guy who you are seeing consistently fall to the 7th and you go, oh my God, what an incredible value. This guy's a 5th round talent. If you're figuring that out, man, NFL GMs with an entire support staff of scouts are also probably figuring that one out. So I think that's an element of it, but I am frustrated that I don't think they maximized value. I wonder if they could have traded back a little more, just because relative to consensus boards, which for people that don't know, it's taking kind of all the draft big boards we have publicly available and averaging them down to get a consensus. It's a fairly predictive tool of how drafts turn out. Now, that's comparing it to a business where if you go 50-50, you might be headed for the Hall of Fame. So relatively predictive doesn't mean a lot. It said Luke Wattenberg in 2022 was a terrible pick. You look at the value the Broncos have gotten out of that, it's a pretty damn good pick, actually. So none of it's gospel, but relative to consensus boards, the Broncos had the 30th best draft in the NFL. I get the disappointment around that. In spite of that, I'm okay with the draft because I get every single pick. Jahdae Barron, I see what they're going for there. RJ Harvey, I very clearly see what they're going for there. Even less popular picks like Pat Bryant or Q Robinson. I can very easily see, like, Q Robinson, elite special teamer. They need to replace some special teams help. And he's got traits you just don't see in edge rushers in the 5th round. Like, that's a swing for the fences with also a pretty high floor. Typically 5th round edges are going to be guys with extremely limited traits. He's not that at all. And he gives you a high floor as an awesome special teamer. Nick Saban said this guy is the best special teams player he's ever coached. So like that one on the consensus boards is a major reach. I'm not that mad about it. I see why it happened. I can get why they did it. Punter was a big need. I know some people are upset about taking the punter in the 6th round. He was projected to go at the end of the 6th round. They took him with the last pick in the 6th round. That seems like fine value to me. And then what's the last guy? Loner. That one's weird. I think odds are that doesn't work out, but incredibly high upside swing at pick 241. I'm fine with it, especially because the buzz is the Broncos had a pretty good word that Loner was going to go off the board in one of those 16 picks after them. So he wasn't going to be available as a UDFA. And if they wanted him, they had to draft him with pick 241 and take, whoever they maybe else would have wanted at 241 and hope they wound up becoming a UDFA. So I think there's problems with it in terms of maximizing overall value. I don't take much issue with any of the picks. I would give it like a B- draft. I ultimately like what they did. I don't think they maximized their opportunities.
And I totally hear that. But I think I am in a position where I can say, F your value, because if they got the guys that they wanted and this turns out to be stellar, which, right, we don't get to grade this out until 18, 20 months from now. I'm excited about it. I'm very intrigued by that tight end pick because 1 year of college football, but also being just an athletic anomaly, and being able to play at that level for a year is pretty interesting to me. I want to hope that the experiment works out, especially as it translates to big guy football in the NFL. I think that is a crash course, cut your teeth kind of solution for that position. But I think they were in a position to do so. I just want to really place a lot of emphasis on the comfortability factor of, yes, we realize that the hope is high, right? The circumstances allow the Broncos to take some risks here, being at a comfortable position in which they are, finding a franchise QB, but it doesn't release the sense of urgency. There's a window now. And it's a cheap window with Bo Nix, but it also comes with a lot of questions that need to be answered moving forward. Like, were there some missed opportunities to go along the trenches a little bit more? Possibly, but I think they have time to rectify that moving forward. Zach, I think you wanted to take that in a little bit of a different direction. Did you have something else to add?
Yeah, I think just some interesting loner nuggets, because he's the guy that no one really knows about. Interesting details. 4 catches his college career, all 4 went for touchdowns. That's the stat that's gone around there a little bit. People might know that. Doing KOA's day 3 coverage, I actually got to ask him a question during like a little interview, or asked him a couple questions. But one of them I asked, before going to Utah this last season to play football, because they recruited him from Baylor. He was a basketball player at Baylor. Utah recruits him to play on their basketball team and their football team. he's like, sure, why? They talked him into it. They made him think it was a good idea. I mean, clearly it was. He's now drafted into the NFL. So he goes for it. Prior to the 2024 season, he hadn't played football since the 7th grade. So I think that's just a remarkable little detail there. You know, who knows if it'll work out. I think the fact that the Broncos have a Utah tie, I saw Paul commenting about a lot of Utah players getting drafted by the Broncos, and I like Devon Villay, Jonah Ellis, now of course Loner. I think there's a reason for that. I think George Payton has pretty good insight into the Utah program. And I think you'll continue to see them target Utes, in part because I think they have more information on them than most teams. And I think that might cut both ways. They might avoid a Ute that everyone else is expecting them to take because they have some information that other teams don't.
I love that little nugget. Zach Seeger's our resident insider. Pretty cool interview. You do what you can, you do your best, and we appreciate it that you would take the time to join us on a Sunday evening just to talk about the Denver Broncos. So your check is in the mail there, Zach. Let's do a little bit of overview. I know I said we were going to start at the first. We're hopping around all over, but I do want to just say the pick at 20 for Jade, it fits the defense nicely. And I think the versatility is the theme with Sean Payton that you're going to see here in this pick and then moving forward. You know, the ability to play in multiple spots. I think what goes without saying is the ability to be somewhat of a turnover machine, right? This level of anticipation, the ferocity in his methods of attack, 8 turnovers, 3 of those for interceptions in a 3-year period. Really points to maybe possibly Vance Joseph finding a way to maximize a type of player at that caliber. And I think just in combination with what the secondary is already doing, the Broncos are in a great spot to be successful here. I'm not quite sure what this is in reference to, but yes, whatever I said, I meant it quite literally. Kodiak Broncos podcast. Thank you, LTB, for letting me appear on Engage 8. You're welcome, Kodiak. Thank you. We appreciate you. Hit it, Zach. Yeah. Pick one. I have your reaction on video. And I think everybody was sort of wide-eyed and but it wasn't a bad one, right? It wasn't like in disgust. It was a like, oh wow, was not anticipating that.
I think the shock was negative at first just because it was such a surprise. And it was like, what are they thinking here? Like, corner, really? Like, that's not really a premium position. And then I think as you digest it more and more, it became more and more appealing. It's one of my favorite picks of the draft. I think he's an awesome talent. I think, top 10, 15 talent in this draft at worst. I believe them that they had a top 10 grade on the guy. I think you see, it's not a pick that you make if he's not your best player available. They weren't reaching for a need here or anything. I think they just weren't expecting him to be there. He suddenly was there. It seems like the in-league thought, based on just what I've heard on, different shows and, from the Broncos themselves in their press conferences and interviews, is that everyone seemed to think that Barron was going 13 to the Dolphins. And when Kenneth Grant went there instead, it was like, whoa, we might be able to get something special here. And I think his impact on the team should be pretty great too. He doesn't really have to come off the field for you ever because he's so versatile. You need help at safety, he can do that. You need help at nickel, he can do that. You're in a base defense look, and you don't want him at safety for whatever reason, he can be your boundary corner opposite Surtain. So the versatility is incredibly valuable there. I think someone like Trent McDuffie, that's the high end version of what he could be, but kind of gives you that idea of an elite shutdown nickel presence who can also play on the outside. And that's not his specialty, but he can be respectable out there. I really love it though. The element I really love is you go to NFL teams want to get their best weapons away from Patrick Surtain for obvious reasons. And the easiest way to do that is to line up your weapon in the slot. Outside extreme examples like Jamar Chase, Surtain isn't going to follow those elite weapons into the slot. Broncos don't have to worry about that anymore. They, at least they hope, they think, have an elite weapon of their own now as a slot defender to shut those guys down. That's a detail I really, really love.
And I love that you bring that up, right? It's the whole thing when we go into our bold predictions to the game is who's going to line up with PS2, and now it's almost like how are they going to avoid that absolute lights out defense that we're seeing in the making on paper, right? Is yet to be seen, but I feel really good about this pick. I feel really good about what happened after this pick too, right? Round two, the Broncos acquired picks 57, 74, 111, and 230 from the Panthers, exchanging out their bevy there. So they traded back just a little bit. And then a second trade, as we all waited in anticipation for them to pick again, they traded back 3 to 60. And 130 from the Lions, shouts out to them, in exchange for picks 57 and 230. So with that number 60 overall, RJ Harvey from UCF is a new running back addition for the ground game for the Denver Broncos. Maybe not the name that Broncos country was anticipating. However, I think there's some really great highlights that we've been seeing over the last couple of days being posted from Harvey or of Harvey that indicate that even though with a smaller frame, when you're looking at measurables, he moves big. I don't think that's necessarily a concern that should be had. It's not one that I have necessarily because of the movement you see on the field, right? His ability to break tackles is still there. Reminds me of kind of like a very stout runner. So I'm not concerned about size, but I know that has been brought up kind of since the pick happened. Zach, what was your initial response to the Harvey pick?
I'm a huge fan of it. I think I might have been higher on RJ Harvey than anyone in Broncos country pre-draft. We did our consensus big board exercise for Let's Talk Broncos, and I had him ranked 40 on mine. I had no problem with him going 60. Consensus big boards disagree. I don't want to act like everyone had him that high. Consensus boards have him around 100. They do think it's a pretty sizable reach by the Broncos, so that's worth considering. But yeah, I think he's a really exciting talent. I see some Alvin Kamara to his game. I think the receiving ability is a lot of projection, but you see a player who is incredibly fast, and the acceleration's there too. It's not just build speed. He can be very fast in the short area. The cuts, like you said, he cuts and slices through the defense very effortlessly. I think something that really gets you excited about him is his vision. His vision is up near the top options in this draft class, where he's so good in the congested spaces, setting up his blockers, and really tempoing his speed. He understands, hey, I've got a convoy of guys around me right now. I don't have to use that 4.3 speed. I can run with them, use my blockers, wait for that little crease to open up, and then I'm going to gun it. And, you know, you talked about the ability to bounce off some tacklers, some contact balance. 69 missed tackles forced. Now, that's also counting some elusiveness. If you juke a guy out, that counts too. But 69 missed tackles forced this past year. Amari Hampton was third in the class, and we all know Amari Hampton's play style: physical, knocking over guys, running over them, shaking them off. He had 73. RJ Harvey had 69. So a guy who in his own right has solid contact balance. At 5'8", he's 205 pounds, maybe even 208. That is a very round body. He is a pinball, as Joey said on our Friday night show, instantly reacting to the pick. I think maybe the big question is going to be his pass game impact. The pass protection is a negative right now. He has the frame. He's not that different in terms of size from a Travion Henderson, from Ashton Genty. Those are maybe the two best pass protecting backs in this draft. So he can get better there. It's not a lack of physical ability, but he's not there right now. So that's going to be problem area number one. Area number two is he's not super proven as a receiver. What he's shown on tape is really promising, but he only had, I think, 29 or 30 receptions last year. And so he has to demonstrate a little more there. Now, Travion Henderson, the amazing receiver we've all talked about, right? He had 30 last year too. So a little, people are getting discussed differently based on what their pre-draft profile was, for sure. But yeah, I think RJ Harvey is borderline a steal. That wasn't consensus opinion, but I think he is going to be very dynamic presence in this Broncos offense from day one. I'll stop gushing now, Bree. I love the kid. I can't help myself.
No, and I appreciate that because that's why I'm looking to you to sort of paint the picture in a different light. I know there is a lot of frustration, but this is what happens, right? You get your hopes up for a specific player, you have your draft crush, you fall in love with that, you find every possible way to map that journey to your team, and then that's not what happens. I don't blame the emotional responses, but I do love the idea that if you instantly comp a player like RJ Harvey to Alvin Kamara, my brain instantly lights up, right? Like, what sort of impact are you seeing for that? We're already going to anticipate kind of this exponential lift in the run game for the Denver Broncos, which is we've been clamoring for. We are a very thirsty crew when it comes to the ground game, and I think it's important to know how we get there. Now, might it possibly be that Audric Estime is kind of that other piece to the puzzle? Yes, quite possibly. And there's some other moves that they could make. There's some free agents that still loom that'll need to be picked up. And there's a lot of, you guys know how this goes. I'm only explaining what you've already seen before, but there's some players that won't perform and won't get retained by a team in the final that you could see the Broncos possibly making a move for. So the search is not over, but the anticipatory relationship with the draft is sort of kind of feeding. What I see is maybe a little bit of disappointment that doesn't necessarily need to be there. But again, I don't like to tell you how to fan. I'm just letting you know. I do want to see, though, Zach, I think the only concern I have is I want to see that same speed that he showed in college translate to the NFL. Super productive. And I think he's right up the Broncos alley. And I think that's why he was Sean Payton's guy. Feeling as though you really touched on it when we were talking about the number 74 pick there in round 3 for the Broncos. This one, I think, caught some people off guard, but it was in a weird sense, right? There was a clamoring for, well, we got to go offense. We have to go. What about a tight end? And then ultimately knowing that a wide receiver could be in the mix. Maybe Pat Bryant wasn't the player that all of Broncos country was hoping for at pick 74. I was talking to the UK Roar of the Lions podcast, and this was one of their guys, specifically for the Lions, and they wanted to know, they were kind of jealous and green with envy that the Broncos got him. So I wanted to know why, right? Like, what makes that? Sean Payton himself is quoting the resemblance of a Michael Thomas. So what are we missing something? Because I think that he's your lower. I think you were a little bit lower on Pat Bryant, but not necessarily with a low grade. Is that summarizing it completely?
Yeah. He admittedly didn't make my rankings. He was a guy I watched, and I was like, I don't know. And then, so I'll kind of do a cursory watch of a bunch of guys, and I kind of get my short list down of like, okay, I like these ones, and then I'll go in and watch some more of them. And Pat Bryant didn't make that first cut, but I've gone back, I've watched some more since, and oh man, the Kyle Monungai was not a better prospect than Audric Estime. Not to go down that rabbit hole really quick, but yeah, Pat Bryant, I think it was maybe a bit of a reach. But there are some things about him that I can't overlook. Not to shout out another podcast, but I would implore everybody to go check out, on the KOA Sports feed, the interview they did with Pat Bryant. Like, oh my God, that guy, the way he talks is like, it's a different end of the spectrum than Jahdae Barron. He's not like Jahdae Barron. You hear him talk about his mom and everything, and that's, oh wow, like his humbleness, his maturity and everything. Pat Bryant is like, his confidence and his willingness to do whatever he's got to do stands out. He loves blocking. He loves being physical and dominating the defense. He talked about how he wants to, really bully and beat up on whoever is covering him, whoever's lining up opposite him the entire game. And that's a defined part of his personality, that he not only loves making big plays, he averaged like 20 yards per reception. So he was that big play target in Illinois' offense. Not only does he love making big plays, he loves setting up the blocks that allow the guys behind him to have big plays too. And he talked about cherishing that similarly. So that stood out to me. I thought that was really cool. The other thing I think is far out with him and his tape. Again, I think it's fine. I'm kind of with the general consensus that maybe he was more of a round 4 guy and they reached taking him in round 3. That said, I have a sinking feeling I might be wrong because some of his, like looking at the numbers are ridiculous, especially considering the quarterback play he had. He had some of the worst quarterback play in the Power 4, and he is more productive than just about any receiver that goes before him. Yards after the catch per reception. He's a 4.6 guy. You don't expect that to be a strong suit. He is better than everyone drafted before him outside Trey Harris and Kyle Williams. Contested catch rate, way better than everyone drafted before him. He ranked like 7th in all of college football last season in that category. Completes 70%. That's a ridiculous number, by the way. 70% of his contested catch opportunities, right? Like Bo Nix, everyone was freaking out about him completing 70% of his passes overall as a prospect, right? This guy's doing that on contested catch situations exclusively. Tet McMillan, the guy who went at the top of the draft, whose specialty was contested catch situations, he's at 60%. Jaden Higgins goes at pick 35, I believe, because he's so great in contested catch situations. His catch rate is 58%. Drop rate, only Jack Besh out of the guys drafted before him performed better than Pat Bryant. 1.8% drop rate. Incredibly reliable in that regard. Good blocker, as I already said. I think he's going to be a great red zone target. Kind of clearly fits what Sean Payton is looking for in that like Marcus Colston, Michael Thomas archetype. Cortland Sutton's coming up with a deal after this year, and they kind of could use a backup plan for, their ex receiver long term. So even though I felt like this is a reach and maybe my least favorite part of the Broncos draft, I can wrap my head around it pretty easily, and I can see the upside, even if it's not what I would have done.
I think that takes an ultra amount of awareness, Zach. I think that you can say, although it's not in line with what you would have done, that there is a vision for kind of what to see out of Pat Bryant. Hopefully route running is one of those specifically that they'll see. We'll see some separation in the ranks as well, because there is a concern. And we talked about to start the show of the positional value there. How does he sort of separate himself and crack the top 3 of the receiver room for the Denver Broncos? And I think D-Bronx made that point, but I cannot find it at this time. I am getting inundated with comments, but I just wanted to throw that out there, that I think there's ultimately enough question marks in that current room where we're sort of still seeing the horse race happen for who's really going to shine as one of the top 3 receivers here for the Denver Broncos. It's an open game for everyone. The dude has stopped by. Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Just going to Random Teens fan feeds to see their draft reactions. Welcome, dude. If you feel so obliged, go ahead and subscribe. This is Let's Talk Broncos. This is our 4th season. This is our 3rd off season, 4th season upcoming, right?
Yeah. Wait, yeah.
That's insane.
Because was Russ our first year? Yeah, 2021 would have been our first year. You're
Drew
right.
Drew Lock was our first year.
2, 3, 4. Yeah. So we're going into we've already done year 4. We're going into year 5.
I'm gonna vomit.
That's crazy to think about. I like this comment from Judson Cake here. Because Pat is so good at blocking. I do think for some of the Broncos fans pushing back on this, and you do want to do better than this probably, but at worst case, he's going to be a sizable upgrade on little Jordan Humphrey in that same role. So I think that's something you could look forward to. Shout out to my mom in the chat. Love you, Mom. Good seeing you today.
I wasn't going to call you out, but it was too cute.
I know. I got to
highlight. I know. She's been so good to us and you, I guess, when you're not pestering her to the most of it. I don't know what this is in response to, but we'll highlight it
Mama
as
figures. Mama Shrin, I guess.
yeah, exactly. It still counts though. All right. Trades. All right. Number 101. I love the movement here. I love that it was more defense. I think that there's obviously some questions of not necessarily fit. It's just it's not who I thought they were going to go when they went there, right? So with 101, I think they could have gone like if you wanted to go in this direction, I think a better player to take was Jordan Birch, who was still available with the 74th pick. That makes me just feel like they really liked the wide receiver when they did. So that's okay. But I selfishly wanted that because I like his style, right? But into the meteor part of the draft, they score Savion Jones from LSU, another pretty stark athletic build, 6'5", 280, defensive end. I think now we're talking, right? Like now we're getting into, what is the plan for the defense? It's a reassuring move because you've got some contracts looming, obviously across the defensive line. Maybe not a day one starter, but it does allow for the idea that if they do move on from some of those guys in the trenches, this is insurance, creating a ton of pressure, being able to play outside of just defense. So he was consistent and impactful in pass rushing. So my hope is the continued development, and maybe there is a plan for some versatility for moving into the interior, because I think that's what the Broncos are so hungry for and desperate for. Zach, what did you think of the pick? Is this actually a contingency for possibly not being able to retain some of the present edges that are in the room?
Yeah, and I think it's more John Franklin Myers personally, because he is that edge right now. But I think when you check him out, I hate his edge stuff. I really do. I do not like it at all. They also played him inside a good bit as kind of that 4-eye we see a lot of college teams use. And I think that's where he really thrived, where he was able to work inside, use his kind of height, weight, length combination a little more. That's kind of his selling point, I think. He's another kind of traits guy. You don't see guys with his traits on the defensive front often available in round 4. 34-inch arms, good, well-built body, inconsistent burst off the line, but you see the flashes of it being really good. And if he can do it once, he can do it, repeatedly if you're able to coach that out of him, as the old scouting adage goes. So I like it. I think the coolest part of it is it sets you up perfectly for John Franklin Myers' departure, because John Franklin Myers, kind of an edge, or that's how he entered the NFL. He's kind of moved inside, this kind of hybrid body type, bit of a tweener. That's what Savion Jones is. You see JFM coming up on a contract year, wanting a new contract. Broncos haven't entered negotiations with him. They draft this kid. That speaks volumes. So, time will tell if it works out or not. But I think, it's good to insulate yourself against him potentially leaving. And then also we've talked a lot about the snap counts along that defensive line and how a lot of those guys were having to absorb way too many snaps, way too much wear and tear. This should help spread it out a little more.
I kind of love that point above all else. There's a split in the chat right now that I want to, I guess, point out. Andy, thank you so much for commenting. It's good to see you. If you haven't already, go check out Andy over on the socials. Andy, feel free to drop your handles. I give you permission to do so. But D-Bronx said, I didn't go why they kept trading down and not adding picks. They essentially moved back in round 2 to move their other picks up, and then drafted guys way over consensus. This was the most puzzling thing about those moves. Zach, did you want to shed light on kind of where D-Bronx is going with this?
I'm totally with D-Bronx. I think it's frustrating. I think the one area it's pretty excusable is where they go from 6th all the way up to the 4th. That's good value created. You look at the guys that were there in the 6th round. I think you compare them to Q Robinson, and you like that pick for the Broncos. Outside of that, I'm with him. They are going against the consensus board, and that can work out. Again, that's fairly predictive, but it certainly can work out to buck that trend and go, hey, I know more than you guys. I'm smarter than general consensus. It's not a great strategy, but it obviously can work out. I just think if you're going to do it, get yourself a lot of rolls of the dice, because you're playing a strategy that maybe has a lesser hit rate of 40 or 30% or whatever it might be. And ultimately, at the end of the day, your rate isn't what matters. It's how many quality players are you adding to the roster? How many contributors are you adding to the roster? So if you're going to take these lower percentage swings, at least make sure you're taking a lot of them. And by prioritizing moving up in the draft in those trades, rather than adding extra capital, they didn't do that. And so it's frustrating that it's one thing to prioritize moving up. If you're going to take guys you can't get later on, to in those trade backs go, oh, we got to be moving up with these picks. And then with those picks, draft guys that could have been available later. It's like, dang, why did we even get that extra capital? So I get where D-Bronx is coming from there. That's, again, why, despite me liking a lot of the picks, and I know I'm in the minority there, it's like a B- to me instead of a B+ draft. I don't think they maximize their value or maximize their opportunities.
Sure. And unless we were privy to the conversations, the right or wrongness, I think, of the conversation is where I get stuck on, right? I also like it when you start jumping into but in the valuation and then in the consensus boards. But Sean Payton went specifically after these players for whatever reason. And I hope that it pays off. And that's a lot. That's a lot of trust there coming from somebody who is still on the lower end of the whole Sean Payton conversation. And I can say, I got to see that vision play out, and then I can judge it after the fact. But we shall see. I think I did love what he said, though, is if you continue to pick good players, you start making your team better and you start ending up with a good football team. That's how I see it. Go ahead.
Sorry, really quick. I just, I agree with your Sean Payton point fully. I think that's a really good point.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that. Thank you, Zach. I appreciate it. I would bow, but I'm sitting. The Tulpa King said, really interested by Q Robinson. Came into Alabama under 220 and buried behind future first and second rounders, but showed flashes this year before getting hurt. Base immediate athletic special teamer. I wanted to start with this comment because at 134, they take another linebacker, Q Robinson from Alabama. I don't have a great hold on kind of what this means, but I think if you are taking into consideration the ability to make an impact on special teams, and we don't want to see the turnover there in that positional grouping because of the turnover in the coaching staff, right? So they're paying special mind. What I liked about this draft in general was that there was a smattering of talent taken and it wasn't too heavily weighted in either direction. And I think this pick really highlights that. Zach, what do you have on Q and how do you think this plays out for Sean Payton?
Yeah, I who knows if he realizes all the edge rushing potential. He's only started 5 games for Alabama as that edge rusher. Now, again, he's got traits that are special. He was recruited to Alabama to play edge, a spot where we see, kind of to this comments pointing out, they churn out first and second round talents there nonstop. And the reason they do that is because they're recruiting some high school guys with awesome traits, and Q Robinson falls into that bucket. Stylistically a similar type to like Benito. He's going to try and beat you with his burst off the line. He's bendy, and I think you love to see that. You don't see guys with his first step edge defenders with his first step and his bend available in the 5th round. Why was he there? Well, because he's barely played defense in college. Like that's a big reason why he falls. But I think taking the bet on those traits there, I like. He's actually one of my more favorite picks in this class. I think him and Harvey outside the 1st round are probably my favorite picks, because not only are you getting that upside potential at edge, you are getting the guy who Nick Saban has lauded as the best special teams player he's ever coached. Like, Nick Saban's coached a lot of dudes. Like, even before Alabama, this guy was, the Browns defensive coordinator under Bill Belichick. He's been around. He's coached a lot of special teams players. And again, kind of going back to that Bama recruiting point, if you get recruited to Bama and you're a 5-star freshman, there's a good chance you're not getting on the field. And you're not getting on the field on offense or defense. Guess what Nick Saban's going to ask you to do? Play special teams. Jamison Williams, he's a very obvious example that jumps out. Top 11 pick, superstar wide receiver for the Crimson Tide. He was also a shutdown, game-changing gunner for them, who would use that 4.2 speed to fly down the field and blow up a punt returner before he had a chance to do anything. Nick Saban's has coached special teams units that were fucking 11 5-stars, top to bottom. And he goes, this Q Robinson kid, he's the best I've ever seen do it. That, to me, people overlook special teams and the value there. I remember 3 to 4 years ago when everyone was furious about how the Broncos special teams unit was costing them points on a weekly basis. Investing in players like Q Robinson is how you don't only avoid those horrible mistakes, but you make your special teams unit an actual benefit, a factor to your team's ability to win games.
I love the way that you put that. I was distracted because there's a comment in here that I'm just going to call out real quick, and then we're going to get back on track because we don't have time. But Will Topper has found your comments on early man and their low IQs and their abilities to take on gorillas. So I just wanted to point out that the conversation is strong and it is still going. So shouts out to Will and his doubt on, or maybe his doubt on the gorilla. I don't know at this point where he stands.
I guess it would be kind of doubting the gorilla, giving, or I don't know, giving cavemen more credit. We can't give them IQ tests, so it's hard to say. But there is the Flynn theory, or the Flynn theorem, which is that, and it's pretty proven dating back to 1900, that every decade, humanity, just with generations going on, us being able to speak and everything, we pass on our knowledge to the next generation. That's why we evolved the ability to speak and why it's been so valuable to us. We can, pass on information to each other, make others smarter than we are. Shout out to the Let's Talk Broncos podcast. Am I right? Anyways, but so every 10 or so years, you see the IQ raised by 3 points. Now, obviously, that doesn't go back to caveman times because we'd be looking at negative 3,000 IQ. But the idea that, if we hover around 100 on average, that they fell, 60, 70, I don't think that's far-fetched in the slightest. They were just getting out of the trees. That's not true. That part's wrong. Don't listen to that part. But everything else I said was accurate.
You are on such a roll there. D-Bronx said, just saying the Jeremy Crawshaw pick better get as long as a segment as Q. All right. Well, you ask and ye shall receive, the Aussie from the Emu Plains. Emu? Why is that word?
Emu. Mew or moo? That's a good question.
It's Mew. It's got to be Emu. From the Emu Plains. Listen, I know Patrick Quixote was excited about this pick. Punter, you needed a punter. There may not be a punter battle for training camp, which I think this is the saddest thing to come out of this pick, that we just don't have to wait to see that play itself out here in the summer months as we get ramped up for 2025. Really excited about this. Yes, Australia did fight in a war against emus, and many a life were lost, which is a perfect opportunity to talk more about the idea that could 100 people take on a singular emu.
Very easily. I will say, you can look up the Emu War. It lasted, I think, one month, 1 week, 1 day, or 1 year, 1 month, 1 week. I forget. It's something easy like that. But the humans gave up. The Australia conceded the Emu War, which is a very depressing detail. If you ever need to talk shit to an Aussie, I'd start there. But Jeremy Crawshaw, I like it. I think he's the best punter in this draft, and it was a position of need for the Broncos. No one likes to think about specialists, and understandably so. But their punter going into the draft was Matt Hawk, brother of Mike, who hasn't been a starter in the NFL each of the last 3 seasons, I believe. Definitely not the last 2. I think it's 3. he's been called into action as like the guy teams sign when their punter gets hurt. So he's not one of the 32 best punters in the world. And he was the only punter the Broncos had. So absolutely an area they probably needed to improve. Absolutely an area they needed to improve. Yeah, this guy's the best punter in the draft. I'm not going to act like I was breaking down punter film, but 28 punts inside the 20 to only 4 touchbacks. To me, that speaks to precision. He had a down year in terms of net average this year, and he was at 13th in all of college football in that metric. So talking about a guy who can boom it and seemingly boom it accurately. So let's go Jeremy Crawshaw. That's not a punter. That's a punter.
This is all D-Bronk's fault because he specifically requested us to vamp into the punter skid. But all right. The dude, everyone complains about taking a punter until you end up with the worst average starting field position in the league when the season is done. Congratulations for the comment of the night, dude. I think you're absolutely right. When it comes to that.
Sorry, comments like that pull the whole room together. Sorry, I knew you were going to segue.
I appreciate that more than anything. So thank you for interrupting me before I did. Last piece, and I want you to take it into undrafted free agents. We already talked a little bit about Caleb Lohner. I just wanted to know if you had anything to add before I asked you what was your favorite acquisition after the draft had ended.
Ooh, let me get a different UDFA's name in my brain because I can only think of the one right now, and he was not my favorite. I do think let's talk about Clay Webb a little bit. We already talked about Lohner, but Clay Webb, for those that don't know, was a 5-star offensive line recruit to the University of Georgia. Right? How did this guy end up at a small school and going undrafted? Well, he decided in high school before he got to the University of Georgia that it would be a funny idea, along with some classmates. He was the one who did the act, but some other classmates egged on the drinker to drink it. But he tainted a bottle of Powerade. I think you guys, if someone wants to figure out how he tainted it, feel free to Google that. He tainted a bottle of Powerade. And yeah, reading the story made me feel a little queasy. Him and a group of other high schoolers convinced a different high schooler to drink it, and led to a whole lawsuit situation. Does seem like there were maybe additional field concerns there with him too. Not aware what those are. I'm only aware of the one thing. But if, one undrafted free agent is going to make the roster, I hate to say it, the Broncos need depth on the interior offensive line. That's where this guy plays. And he was a 5-star that was headed to Georgia. I haven't watched any Jacksonville State offensive line film, but the pedigree is there that it suggests to me that maybe he's the guy that makes it out of the bunch. The one I'll be rooting for, though, where was it? Arkansas State wide receiver Courtney Jackson. Understandably, people aren't overly excited with the wide receiver addition of Pat Bryant. Courtney Jackson is a fun, bet on an athlete out of Arkansas State. See what happens. And he didn't commit a really heinous, gross crime. So he is the guy I will highlight.
Yeah, when you talk about character concerns, when they come to the egregiousness of I don't know, man. I'm sad that I found this out today. I'm sad that I found it out here live on Let's Talk Broncos. But I also can't stop but laugh at what the chat is doing right now. So you're missing out if you're watching anywhere else but over on YouTube. Search Let's Talk Broncos and join the conversation.
Jason's comment's great. That's really good.
I'll say kind of fun over here.
I'll say shout out to Zanb21 on Twitter for putting out the tweet that made me the most queasy in a long time. Where he was like, what was it? Teams. It was like Broncos coaches after they cut Clay Webb, and it was like them all eating donuts. And man, that was a foul video. I could not handle it. But.
No.
Yeah, it was gross. Don't like that one. Overall, my favorite pick away from the UDFAs, my favorite pick, I think I go Jahdae Barron. There's just a lot of elements of it I think are really exciting with what he allows you to do defensively. And if he lives up to his potential, it only makes Surtain more deadly, and it makes life for offenses in the passing game very, very difficult, where whoever your top boundary guy is or whatever you want to do on the boundary, Surtain can lock that down. And whatever you want to do in the slot, Barron can lock that down. And it really leaves you with one option. And like Surtain's value isn't just he shuts down a guy. It's, hey, we've got one-on-one and now we can shift our math elsewhere. He changes the math for a defense and allows you to deploy your other 10 players differently. If you've got that with one defensive back and that with another defensive back, where they're each taking away more than just their one man, you know, and changing the math for the defense, you can have a tremendous coverage advantage with the other 9 guys covering the other 3. And obviously not all of those 9 guys are dropping back in coverage, but with the other 9 players rushing the passer / dropping back in coverage to defend the other 3 eligible receivers, it really is game changing. So that idea, it's not going to be there week 1, but knowing that it could get there has me very, very excited to watch Barron's career play out.
I love that. I have nothing to add to that pick. I think that's my just ultimate favorite. But D. Cole brings up a very great point that I want to end on. I heard good things about Utah linebacker Kareem Reed, and with Greenlaw being injury prone, he's got a shot to make the roster, in my opinion. I'm on that train if you are D. Cole, but I'm also under the idea that all of the cornerbacks and safeties that you can possibly amass on your off-season workout, undrafted rookie camps, OTAs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, if we can just have them stocked to the brim, I'm going to feel really good about going into this 2025 season. Justin Yale said, if this defense is below top 5, should Vance be fired? It's so early for that conversation, Jason Yale, I think. But Zach, I'll let you end on that note and we'll get out of here.
Sure. No. I now expectations for this defense should be high. I think like fans should demand this defense is at least a top 3 unit with how much they've invested in it. That said, defense, like year-to-year defensive play is one of the least sticky stats we see in the league. Offense year-to-year is pretty sticky. You got a good offensive play caller, you got a good quarterback. Those 2 elements have such a dramatic impact on how the entire unit plays. And if you've got good ones, they often stay entrenched. So good offense one year is oftentimes a good offense the next year. Defense, though, because it's not just the 11 starters, you've got sub-package players and you need depth in case of injuries. It's a rotating cast of 15, 16 characters who all have a more or less equal impact on things. Defense is just, there's such a wide amount of variance year over year when it comes to defensive performance. That said, they got to be at least top 10. They've invested too much in this defense for them to not be clearly an above average unit. If they finish the year and they're like 13th, I don't think it's crazy to go, we need to be getting more out of our investments. Let's not let Jim Leonard leave the building. Let's promote him to defensive coordinator. I don't think that'll come to fruition, though. I think Vance is going to have a top 3 defense in the league this year, maybe get a head coaching job, and things will work out pretty nicely.
I love it. No, Paul, you're the best. The dude, wait for it. Before you go, last chance Broncos Nation. Well, that's already strike 1 for you. Straight head coaching swap. I know. Schottenheimer for Peyton. Yes. No, the final answer is no. Thank you, though, for asking.
I don't blame the Cowboys fan for trying. It is amazing the Cowboys didn't wind up with Sean Payton when Jerry Jones had that plan for seemingly like a half decade, and then eventually was like, nah, Mike McCarthy, we got to go that route instead. And it did not really work out for him, but fingers crossed for you, the dude. Hope Javonte does well for you.
Yeah, get it right. It's Bronco land. Just kidding. Broncos country will bid you adieu, and we'll see you next time here on Let's Talk Broncos. No.